She paid just $600 for a rusty motorcycle. But this wasn't just any bike. It was a key to a dangerous, powerful world, unlocking a legacy of violence, brotherhood, and a love that would change her forever. If you're new here, subscribe and comment your location. Now let's begin. You need to come out here, ma'am. Now. Maya's paint-stained hand froze, a glob of crimson oil paint threatening to drip from her brush onto the concrete floor of her garage-turned studio. The voice from her doorway wasn't just a voice. It was a low-frequency rumble like the idling of a massive engine. She turned, her heart doing a sudden, frantic tap dance against her ribs. Framed in the fading afternoon light was a man built like a fortress, clad in a leather vest adorned with a winged death's head. The patch above it read, "President." His eyes, the color of a winter storm, scanned her chaotic space before landing on her, and then just beyond her, on the rusted, disassembled hulk of the 1965 Harley she'd triumphantly towed home the day before. "Can I help you?" she managed, her voice a fragile thread. More figures materialized behind him, a sea of leather and denim, their faces a mosaic of weathered skin, scars, and an unnerving collective stillness. They weren't shouting, they weren't threatening, they were just there. Dozens of them spilling out of her small driveway and into the quiet suburban street, a silent, terrifying army. The president, a man named James, took a slow, deliberate step inside. The air grew thick, charged with a tension Maya could taste, oil, leather, and pure, unadulterated power. "The bike," James said, his voice dangerously soft. "Where did you get it?" A junkyard," she stammered, setting down her brush with a trembling hand. "Over in Oak Creek. I'm an artist. I was going to use it for a sculpture." She gestured weakly at a half-finished metal angel welded from scrap, a pathetic attempt to explain the presence of this rusted relic in her sanctuary. A collective, almost imperceptible shift went through the men crowding her doorway. It wasn't aggression. It was something else, something deeper, awe. James moved past her, his bulk blocking out the light. He didn't look at her. His entire being was focused on the Harley. He reached out, his calloused, grease-stained fingers hovering just above the flaking gas tank as if afraid to touch a holy relic. And then Maya saw it. A single tear traced a clean path through the grime on his cheek. "Finn's bike," he whispered, and the name hung in the air, sacred. After all these years. The man next to him, introduced later as David, the club's sergeant-at-arms and built like a brick wall, placed a steadying hand on James's shoulder. "It's him, brother, no doubt." James finally turned his stormy gaze back to Maya. The intensity was so overwhelming she took a step back, bumping into her workbench. "What's your name, girl?" he asked. "Maya. Maya," he repeated, and her name sounded like a foreign prayer on his lips. "Do you have any idea what you've bought?" Before she could form a word, David interjected, his voice a gravelly contrast to James's quiet thunder. He gestured to the bike. "See that serial number, K65-1001, hand-stamped by Old Man Finn himself? This ain't just a bike, sweetheart. This is the Genesis car, the first, the one he built the charter on, the one the Reapers stole from us in '78. We thought it was melted down to slag." The story tumbled out of them, right there in her grease-stained garage, surrounded by half-finished dreams. Old Man Finn, the visionary, the founding father. How he'd built not just a motorcycle, but a brotherhood, a code, an empire from this very frame. How its theft had been a festering wound for decades, a legend passed down to every new prospect. James's eyes never left hers. "Our Constitution, the one Finn wrote himself, is very clear. It's not just a piece of paper, it's our blood law." Chapter 1, Verse 1. The spirit of the club resides in its first creation. The holder of the Genesis bike inherits a founding member's vote and a full share of all club holdings in perpetuity. Maya's mind reeled. A founding members vote, club holdings? This had to be a bizarre, elaborate dream. I don't understand. I just paid $600 for some rusty metal. A ghost of a smile, the first crack in his granite facade, touched James's lips. It transformed his face, revealing a handsomeness that was both devastating and dangerous. $600, he murmured, shaking his head, for the keys to our kingdom. He took a step closer, and the scent of him, leather, cold wind, and something uniquely male wrapped around her. The space between them crackled. It was terrifying and, to her utter shock, thrilling. "You own a piece of us now, Maya," he said, his voice dropping to an intimate timbre that vibrated deep in her bones. "Whether you want it or not." The next few hours were a surreal blur. The 80 Hells Angels didn't leave. Instead, with a quiet, military precision, they took over her life. David dispatched a group to secure the perimeter, their massive Harleys forming a steel barricade around her modest home. Another group, under the direction of a wiry, efficient man named Paul, the club's treasurer, started making calls, their low murmurs speaking of lawyers, asset transfers, and things Maya couldn't even comprehend. James remained her silent, imposing shadow. He followed her into her small kitchen as she mechanically made coffee, his presence making the room feel claustrophobic. She fumbled with the coffee can, her hands shaking so badly she dropped it. James moved with a predator's grace, catching it before it hit the floor. Their fingers brushed. A jolt, sharp and electric, shot up her arm. Her breath hitched. His eyes snapped to hers, the storm in them swirling with a new, potent intensity. He didn't let go of the can immediately. He held it, and by extension her hand, captive in that fleeting moment. "You're safe," he said, and it wasn't a platitude, it was a vow. "No one will touch you. No one will take what's yours." "What is mine exactly?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Everything," he replied, his gaze dropping to her lips for a heartbeat before he released the can and turned away, leaving her trembling by the counter. Later that evening, the reality of her situation began to solidify, and with it, a cold dread. A sleek black sedan with tinted windows crawled past her house for the third time. James, who had been standing sentinel at her living room window, went perfectly still. He didn't need to say a word. David from the porch gave a sharp hand signal, and two of the biggest bikers she had ever seen peeled off from the group and followed the sedan on their roaring bikes, their intent clear and menacing. "The Reapers," James stated, coming to stand beside her. He didn't touch her, but she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Word travels fast in our world. They know it's been found, and they know who has it." Terror, cold and sharp, pierced through her shock. "What are they going to do?" James finally looked at her, and the raw, unvarnished truth in his eyes was more frightening than any lie. "They're going to try to take it back, and they won't be as polite as we were." It was David who broke the tense silence that followed, his tone practical. "She can't stay here, James. This place is a fishbowl. No security. She's a sitting duck." James nodded, his jaw tight. "Pack a bag, Maya. Enough for a few days." "I'm not going anywhere with you," she said, a spark of her old defiance flaring. She was an independent woman, a struggler, but she was nobody's pawn. James turned to her fully, and the force of his will was like a physical pressure. "You are coming with me because that bike is now a part of you, and you are now a part of us. And we protect our own. It's not a request." The argument died in her throat. The look in his eyes wasn't one of a man giving an order to a subordinate. It was the look of a man who had just found something he thought was lost forever and would burn the world down to keep it safe. There was a ferocity there, a possessive edge that should have terrified her, but instead it ignited a dangerous, answering fire in her own blood. She packed a bag. The club's compound wasn't what she expected. It wasn't some grim fortified bunker, but a sprawling property on the edge of town, a collection of well-kept buildings centered around a massive rustic lodge they called the Chapter House. Inside, it was all rich wood, leather furniture, and the faint, comforting smell of cigar smoke and whiskey. Photographs of gruff, smiling men and their motorcycles lined the walls, a visual history of a brotherhood. This was their sanctuary, and now it was hers. Her first dinner was a surreal, comedic affair. She was seated at the head of a long oak table, a place of honor, with James at her right hand. 80 hardened outlaws, these legends of fear and folklore, were trying their best to be hospitable. A giant of a man named Mark, with knuckles that looked like they'd punched through concrete, carefully pushed a basket of dinner rolls toward her. "You gotta eat, Miss Maya," he rumbled, his voice surprisingly gentle. "You're too skinny." Another, a younger, handsome biker named Daniel with a devilish grin, poured her a glass of expensive red wine. "Don't let the patches scare you," he winked. "Most of us are house-trained." There was laughter, rough but genuine. They told her stories about Finn, his crazy wisdom, his unshakable loyalty. The time he'd brokered peace with a rival club by winning a game of poker with a straight flush and a smile. They weren't just humanizing their founder, they were humanizing themselves for her benefit. And through it all, James watched her. His gaze was a constant, warm weight. She'd catch him staring, his eyes dark and unreadable, and when she met his look, he wouldn't glance away. He'd hold it, a silent conversation passing between them. It was a heady, intoxicating feeling, being the sole focus of such a powerful man's attention. Later that night, unable to sleep, she wandered out onto the balcony attached to the room they'd given her. It overlooked the compound's courtyard, where the Genesis bike now stood gleaming under a spotlight. It was no longer a rusty piece of scrap. The club's best mechanics had spent the evening reverently cleaning and polishing it, not restoring it to newness, but preserving its aged, legendary patina. She heard a footstep behind her and didn't need to turn to know it was him. "Can't sleep." James's voice was a soft rumble in the quiet night. "My life has been turned upside down in the span of 12 hours, she said, leaning on the railing. "It's a lot to process." He came to stand beside her, close enough that their arms almost touched. The night air was cool, but his proximity made her feel warm. "I know," he said simply. "This world, it's not for the faint of heart. It's brutal, it's demanding, but it's also filled with more loyalty and honor than you'll find anywhere else." "Why me?" she asked, turning to look at him. The moonlight carved out the sharp planes of his face, softening the hardness she'd seen earlier. "Why did I have to be the one to find it?" He looked down at her, his expression unguarded for the first time. "I've asked myself that all day. Maybe Finn sent you to us. Maybe the club was losing its way, getting too comfortable, too corporate in its own way, and then you show up. An artist, a creator, just like he was. Maybe we needed a reminder of where we came from." He reached out, and this time he didn't hesitate. His fingers, surprisingly gentle, traced a path from her temple down to her jawline. The touch was electric, sending shivers cascading through her entire body. It was a claiming, but a tender one. "You're a storm, Maya," he whispered, his face inches from hers. "A beautiful, chaotic storm that blew into our ordered, violent world and changed everything." Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was madness. He was a criminal, a king of a shadow empire. She was a woman who bought her clothes from thrift stores and her groceries with coupons, but in that moment, none of it mattered. The chemistry between them was a live wire, humming with a tension that was both emotional and fiercely physical. He leaned in, and she knew he was going to kiss her. She wanted him to. God, how she wanted it. But at the last second, he stopped, his lips a breath away from hers. "This isn't why I brought you here," he said, his voice thick with a restraint that seemed to cost him dearly. "I know," she breathed. He pulled back, his hand dropping from her face, leaving her skin tingling. "Get some sleep, Maya. Tomorrow we have a church." "A church?" A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. "A meeting. And you, my dear, have a vote." The next morning, the gravity of her new position settled in with the dawn. Dressed in a simple pair of jeans and a t-shirt, she was led into the chapter house's main hall. The room was filled with the senior members, the patch holders, their faces grim. The air was thick with the scent of coffee and tension. At the center of the discussion was a business proposition, a lucrative but morally ambiguous shipping contract with a known arms dealer. The money was astronomical, enough to secure the club's finances for years. But it came with risks, both from the law and from their own conscience. The arguments flew back and forth. David was for it, his pragmatic eyes seeing only the security it offered. Paul was against it, worried about the long-term entanglement. "We're not gun runners," Paul argued, slamming his hand on the table. "Finn would have never stood for it. Finn didn't have to deal with the Reapers getting stronger by the day," David shot back. "We need capital for the war that's coming." All eyes eventually turned to James, who had been listening in silence. He looked at each man, then his gaze finally landed on Maya. "We have a new voting member," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "The floor is yours, Maya." 80 pairs of eyes, some curious, some skeptical, some openly hostile, locked onto her. Her mouth went dry. She was an artist. She debated the merits of abstract expressionism versus realism, not international arms trafficking. She thought of the stories they'd told her about Finn, his honor, his code. She looked at James and saw in his eyes not pressure, but a genuine curiosity. He wanted to know what she thought. She took a deep, shaky breath. I don't know anything about your business," she started, her voice small. "I only know what you've told me about Old Man Finn. You said he built this club on Brotherhood, on loyalty, not on weapons that could tear other families apart." She looked at David, her voice gaining a sliver of strength. "Is this the legacy you want to build on? The one he started with that bike out there? Or is it just about the money?" A heavy silence fell over the room. David looked away, a muscle ticking in his jaw. James watched her, a slow, proud smile spreading across his face. It was a mere flicker, but it felt like a victory. Paul broke the silence. "The lady has a point. We take this deal, we're no better than the Reapers. We vote." The vote was called. It was close. But when the tally was done, the contract was rejected. By one vote, her vote. In that moment, she was no longer just a girl who bought a rusty bike. She was a power. She had changed the course of their history. After the meeting, James found her by the Genesis bike, her hand resting on the aged leather of the seat, trying to calm her racing heart. "You sided with me," he said, coming to stand beside her. "I sided with Finn," she corrected softly. He turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders. "It's the same thing." His eyes searched hers. "You were magnificent in there." This time, when he leaned in, there was no hesitation. His lips met hers, and it was nothing like she had ever experienced. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a claiming, a conflagration. It was all the pent-up tension, the danger, the raw primal attraction igniting at once. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her flush against his hard body, and she melted into him, her hands tangling in the leather of his vest. The world, with all its dangers and complexities, fell away. There was only his taste, his scent, the overwhelming sense of rightness, of a destiny she never saw coming. It was a kiss that promised passion, protection, and a love forged in the fires of a world she was only just beginning to understand. The peace that followed her first church was a fragile, beautiful thing. For a week, Maya's life settled into a strange new rhythm. Her days were no longer spent in the solitary silence of her garage studio, but in the vibrant, chaotic heart of the club. She set up a new workspace in a sunlit corner of the compound's main garage, her canvases and welding torches sitting alongside engine blocks and chrome polish. The men, initially wary, grew fascinated. They'd wander over, offering a grunt of approval at a sketch or a helpful hand with a heavy piece of metal. It was during one of these afternoons that the outside world, the one she'd left behind, came crashing in. Her phone, which had been blessedly quiet, buzzed with an insistent, familiar ringtone. Jessica. A knot of guilt tightened in Maya's stomach. Her younger sister, a bright-eyed kindergarten teacher whose biggest worry was running out of glitter glue, had no idea about the seismic shift in Maya's life. Maya had sent a few vague texts about being on a creative retreat, but the lies felt thin and brittle. She stepped away from the welding mask and answered. "Jess? Hey." "Maya, oh thank God." Jessica's voice was high-pitched, trembling with panic. "There are men outside my apartment, on motorcycles. They've been sitting there for hours, just staring. I called the police and they just drove around the block and left. They said they can't do anything unless a crime is committed. Maya, I'm scared." Ice water flooded Maya's veins. She looked up, her eyes frantically scanning the garage until they found James. He was across the room leaning over a bike with David, but he sensed her distress instantly. His head snapped up, his gaze locking with hers. "What men, Jess?" Maya asked, trying to keep her voice calm. "What do they look like?" "I don't know. Big, leather vests. The patches, one had a skull with a scythe. They're just sitting there. The Reapers. They couldn't get to her inside the compound's fortress, so they were going for the easiest, softest target. Her family." James was at her side in seconds, his hand on the small of her back, a silent question in his eyes. She covered the phone's receiver. "It's my sister. The Reapers are outside her apartment." A storm descended over James's features. He took the phone from her gently. "Jessica, this is James, a friend of Maya's. Listen to me carefully. I want you to go into your bathroom, lock the door, and get in the bathtub. Don't come out for anyone until I call you back and tell you it's safe. Do you understand?" Maya could hear her sister's shaky, terrified "okay" before James ended the call. His voice was low and deadly, cutting through the garage's ambient noise. "David, the Reapers are at 1423 Oakwood Avenue, apartment 4B. Jessica, Maya's sister." David's face hardened into a mask of cold fury. He didn't ask questions, he simply turned and bellowed, "Daniel, Mark, Prospect, saddle up, now, we're rolling hot." The garage exploded into a controlled frenzy of motion. The comedic, light-hearted atmosphere of moments before vanished, replaced by a chilling efficiency. Helmets were snatched, engines roared to life. James's hand tightened on Maya's back. "I'm coming with you," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "Maya, she's my sister, James. She'll be terrified. She needs to see a familiar face." The look in her eyes brooked no argument. It was the same look that had faced down a room full of outlaws. He gave a sharp, reluctant nod. "You stay in the truck, no matter what." He handed her a helmet. No arguments. The ride to Jessica's apartment was a terrifying blur of speed and roaring engines. Maya clung to James's back on his bike, the powerful machine weaving through traffic like a predator. The club moved as one organism, a phalanx of leather and steel. They didn't bother with stop signs or red lights. Traffic parted for them like the Red Sea. They arrived at Jessica's quiet, tree-lined street in a thunderous crescendo. The two Reapers, looking smug and lazy on their choppers, suddenly bolted upright, their arrogance replaced by sheer terror. They were outnumbered 20-1. David and his enforcers didn't even dismount. They simply surrounded them, a wall of silent, menacing intent. One of the Reapers foolishly went for a knife. It was a mistake. Daniel, lightning fast, was off his bike and had the man's arm twisted behind his back in a submission hold before the blade was fully clear of its sheath. The Reaper cried out in pain, dropping the weapon. James killed the engine and helped Maya off. "Go," he said, his voice a low command. "Get her. We'll hold the perimeter." Maya ran, fumbling with her keys at the main door before taking the stairs 2 at a time. She burst into the apartment. "Jessica, it's me!" A whimper came from the bathroom. Maya rushed in to find her sister huddled in the dry bathtub, her face pale and streaked with tears. She looked up, her eyes wide with a fresh wave of fear at the sight of Maya in a leather jacket and helmet. "Maya, what's happening? Who are those people?" "They're friends, Jess. You're safe now." Maya gathered her into a fierce hug, helping her out of the tub. "We need to go. You can't stay here." "Go where?" Jessica asked, her voice small and lost. "With me." She led a trembling Jessica downstairs and out into the street. The scene was surreal. The 2 Reapers were on their knees, hands on their heads, surrounded by a circle of grim-faced bikers. The entire neighborhood was watching from behind curtains and cracked doors. James stood apart, a king surveying his domain. He saw them and strode over, his presence immediately calming the frantic energy around Jessica. "Jessica," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "I'm James. You're safe now. These men won't bother you again." He looked at David and gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. David walked over to the kneeling Reapers. "You tell your boss," he growled, his voice like grinding stones. "You touch this family again. You look at this street again. And we won't be so polite. Now get the hell out of my sight." The Reapers scrambled onto their bikes and fled, the sound of their engines fading into a pathetic whimper compared to the club's dominant roar. James turned his attention back to the sisters. "Let's get you both home." "Home?" Jessica whispered, clinging to Maya. "Yes," Maya said, looking at James, a world of understanding passing between them. "Home." The car ride back to the compound was quiet, Jessica shell-shocked in the back seat. But once they arrived, the club's women once again proved to be the true backbone of the organization. Elena, David's wife, a warm, motherly woman with a spine of steel, met them at the door. "Oh, you poor dear," she clucked, wrapping a blanket around Jessica's shoulders and leading her away from the intimidating sight of the patched members. "Let's get you some hot chocolate and a proper bed. Don't you worry about a thing." As Jessica was led away, Maya stood with James in the courtyard, the adrenaline finally receding, leaving her shaking. "They went after my sister," she whispered, the horror of it finally hitting her. James pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "And they failed," he said into her hair. "Because she's under our protection now. They've declared war on this family, Maya, and we will finish it." He led her upstairs to his room. Their room, she realized with a jolt. It was Spartan, masculine, all dark wood and simple furniture. The events of the day, the fear, the relief, the sheer overwhelming intensity of it all crashed down on her at once. She started to tremble uncontrollably. James saw it. He didn't speak. He simply sat her on the edge of the bed and knelt before her, pulling off her boots with a surprising tenderness. Then he stood and began to undress her, not with lust, but with a profound, aching care. He peeled the leather jacket from her shoulders, then her t-shirt, his knuckles brushing against her skin, leaving trails of fire. When she was down to her underwear, he pulled back the covers and guided her into the bed. Then he undressed himself, his powerful body illuminated by the sliver of moonlight through the window. He slid in beside her, pulling her back against his chest, wrapping his arms around her so completely she felt surrounded, shielded. The warmth of his body seeped into her, calming the tremors. His breath was warm on her neck. His hand splayed over her stomach, holding her close. "I was so scared," she confessed into the darkness, her voice small. "I know," he murmured, his lips brushing her shoulder. "But you were so brave. You're the bravest person I know." He turned her in his arms so she was facing him. In the dim light, his face was all shadows and sharp angles, but his eyes were soft, full of an emotion so deep it stole her breath. "I love you, Maya," he whispered, the words raw and true. "I think I've loved you since the moment I saw you covered in paint and ready to defend a pile of rust with your life. You're the heart of this club. You're my heart." Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over. "I love you too, James." He kissed her then, but it was different from the hungry, claiming kiss in the garage. This was slow, deep, and soul-wrenchingly tender. It was a kiss of homecoming, of vows spoken in the silence. It was a kiss that held the promise of a future, a family, a life built together amidst the chaos. His hands roamed her body with a new kind of ownership, one born of love and protection, not just desire. He worshipped her with his touch, tracing the curve of her hip, the line of her spine, the swell of her breast. Every caress was a whispered promise, every sigh a shared secret. When he finally entered her, it was with a slow, deliberate reverence that made her cry out, not in passion, but in overwhelming emotion. It was a joining of souls, a physical manifestation of the bond that had been forged in a dusty garage and tempered in fire. They moved together in a perfect, timeless rhythm, the outside world and its dangers locked away. This was their sanctuary. This was their truth. Afterward, wrapped in the safety of his arms, their limbs tangled and hearts beating as one, Maya knew there was no going back to her old life. The $600 rusty Harley hadn't just given her a share of a club's wealth, it had given her a family, a love, and a fierce, unbreakable purpose. She was the Genesis holder, and she was home. The morning after the rescue, the compound awoke not to the usual sounds of revving engines and rough banter, but to a tense, focused quiet. The Reapers had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. They had targeted family. In the world of the club, that was an act of war demanding a final, absolute response. Maya found James in the war room, the large map now covered in red marks clustering around a single location. An industrial scrapyard on the river known as the Junkyard, the Reapers' primary stronghold. "They're consolidating their power," James said without looking up, his finger tapping the map. "They know we're coming. They're making their stand." Jessica, who had slept fitfully under Elena's care, was now sitting at the large kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, her eyes wide as she listened to the low, grim planning happening around her. Maya sat beside her, a protective arm around her shoulders. "I don't understand any of this," Jessica whispered. "Motorcycle clubs? Wars? Maya, who are these people?" Maya took a deep breath. "They're my family now, Jess. And they just proved they'll protect what's mine with their lives. That includes you." Just then, a sleek black town car purred into the compound, its tinted windows reflecting the grim faces of the patched members. The door opened, and Elias Thorne stepped out, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, a stark contrast to the sea of leather and denim. "James," Elias said, his voice smooth as he entered the chapter house, his sharp eyes taking in the scene, the map, the grim faces, the two sisters huddled together. "I heard there was some unpleasantness. Targeting civilians, it's a distasteful tactic. It destabilizes everything." "We're handling it," James said, his tone making it clear Elias's presence was tolerated, not welcomed. "Of course you are. But the fallout from a full-scale assault on their stronghold, the police, the media, it could be problematic for all our interests." Elias's gaze slid to Maya, and he offered a sympathetic, polished smile. "My dear, I trust you and your sister are unharmed, a terrifying ordeal." "We're fine," Maya said, her voice cooler than she intended. There was something about his calculated concern that set her on edge. Elias turned back to James. I'm here to offer a cleaner solution, a business proposition. I can make the Reaper problem disappear, permanently. No messy street war, no collateral damage, a simple corporate dissolution. David, who had been silently sharpening a knife, looked up. His eyes narrowed. What's the price? Elias's smile was thin. A minor one, a slight adjustment to the club's shipping routes, a 51% share for my organization. Think of it as outsourcing your security. The room went dead silent. 51%. It wasn't a proposal, it was a hostile takeover. Elias was using the crisis to seize control of the club's legitimate and most profitable ventures. James's laugh was a short, harsh bark. You want me to hand you our empire on a silver platter in exchange for you doing our dirty work? You think we're that weak? I think you're emotionally compromised, Elias said calmly, his eyes flicking to Maya again. A man in love is a dangerous thing, James. He makes mistakes. He takes risks he shouldn't. I'm offering a rational alternative. Maya felt a hot flush of anger. She stood up, her chair scraping against the concrete floor. The sound drew every eye in the room. This isn't a corporate merger, Mr. Thorne, she said, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the tension. This is our family. The Reapers didn't just attack a business rival, they attacked my sister. They threatened a kindergarten teacher to get to a motorcycle. There is no rational alternative for that. There is only one answer. She walked to the map and placed her hand firmly over the junkyard. You don't dissolve a cancer, you cut it out. A slow, proud smile spread across James's face. David gave a grim nod of approval. Even Paul looked reluctantly impressed. Elias studied her, his polished mask slipping for just a second, revealing a glint of cold, calculating respect. I see the Genesis holder has found her voice. A pity it will lead to so much unnecessary bloodshed. He straightened his cufflinks. The offer stands for the next 24 hours. After that, you're on your own. He turned and left, his town car gliding away as silently as it had arrived. The decision was made. There would be no deal. The club would meet the threat head-on as it always had. The following 48 hours were a whirlwind of preparation. The compound transformed into a military forward operating base. Firearms were cleaned, checked, and distributed. Molotov cocktails were filled and capped. Daniel and his scouts used drones to provide live feeds of the junkyard, mapping every stack of crushed cars, every shipping container, every possible sniper's nest. Maya was not sidelined. James and David, recognizing her sharp eye and intuitive understanding of space, included her in the tactical planning. She pointed out sight lines they had missed, suggested using the Genesis bike itself as a high-value distraction, and designed a simple system of colored flags for the prospects to use for communication during the chaotic assault. The night before the raid, James found her in their room staring at a small framed photograph she kept on the bedside table. A picture of her and Jessica taken years ago at a county fair, their faces smeared with cotton candy, utterly carefree. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. We'll get through this, he murmured. And when it's over, this will just be a bad memory. She leaned back into his strength. It's not the fear of what happens tomorrow that scares me the most, she confessed quietly. It's the fear of what this life will do to us. To you. Every time you ride out, a piece of my soul goes with you. He turned her in his arms. Look at me, Maya. This life, our life, is what we make it. It's brutal, yes, but it's also filled with more loyalty and love than most people ever experience. What we have. It's the reason men like Finn built this club. It's the reason I fight. For a future. For you. He kissed her then, a deep, lingering kiss that was both a promise and a farewell. The charged chemistry between them, always simmering just beneath the surface, flared into a desperate, passionate fire. Clothes were shed not in a slow undressing, but in a frantic mutual need to feel skin against skin, to affirm life in the face of potential death. His hands were everywhere, mapping her body as if memorizing it. His mouth was hot and demanding on hers, on her neck, on her breasts. There was a raw, primal edge to their lovemaking, a fierce, unspoken understanding of the stakes. When he entered her, she cried out, her nails digging into the hard muscles of his back, pulling him deeper, wanting to fuse herself to him. They moved together in a frantic, perfect rhythm, a storm of emotion and sensation that left them both breathless and clinging to each other in the aftermath, their bodies slick with sweat, their hearts pounding a frantic, synchronized beat. He held her all night, neither of them sleeping, just lying tangled together in the dark, listening to each other breathe. Dawn came, gray and cold. The entire club assembled in the courtyard. 80 men, a brotherhood bound by blood and oil, stood ready. James, wearing his cut over a tactical vest, addressed them. "Brothers," his voice rang out clear and hard. "The Reapers thought they could frighten us. They thought they could break us by targeting our family. They were wrong." A roar of approval went up. "Today, we remind them why our charter has stood for 50 years. We ride for Finn. We ride for the Genesis. We ride for our family. Today, we end this." The roar was deafening. Maya, standing with Jessica and the other women, felt the sound vibrate in her very bones. She watched as James swung his leg over his bike, his eyes finding hers across the sea of leather. He gave her a single, slow nod. A look of absolute, unwavering love and determination passed between them. Then, he kicked his engine to life. The sound was apocalyptic. 80 Harley Davidsons roaring in unison, a wave of pure, undiluted power that shook the ground. They rolled out of the compound in a perfectly formed column, a steel serpent heading for war. The wait was agony. The women moved to the comms room where Paul was monitoring the drone feeds and radio traffic. The screens showed the club's column approaching the junkyard. The Reapers were ready, barricaded behind walls of stacked cars. The first contact was a violent explosion of noise and static on the comms. Gunfire, shouts, the roar of engines and the sickening crunch of metal on metal. Maya watched, her hand clamped over her mouth as the screens showed a chaotic, brutal ballet of violence. She saw David, a giant with a shotgun, clearing a path. She saw Daniel, agile and deadly, taking out a sniper perched on a crane. And she saw James, a force of nature at the head of the charge, leading his men deeper into the heart of the enemy's stronghold. The battle raged for what felt like an eternity. The club's strategy, refined by Maya's observations, was working. Their forces moved with precision, using the maze of scrap metal to their advantage, flanking and isolating pockets of Reapers. Then the feed from James's body cam showed him breaching the main office building, the Reapers' command center. Inside, he found their president, a hulking brute named Kagan, and Elias Thorne. Elias, looking unruffled, stood near a window watching the carnage below. "I told you this was a mistake, James," he said, his voice calm over the comms. "Look at the mess." "This ends now, Kagan," James growled, his gun trained on the Reaper president. "Thorne promised us the city," Kagan snarled. "He said you were soft, distracted by some artist." "And he used you as a blunt instrument," James said, his voice cold. "And now you're broken." What happened next was a blur on the screen. Kagan lunged, a shot rang out. Kagan fell. Elias simply raised an eyebrow. "A regrettable outcome, but the offer still stands, James. The club is wounded. You need my resources to survive." James turned his gun on Elias. "Get out." Elias smiled, his thin, cold smile. "This isn't over." He walked calmly out a back door, disappearing into the chaos. With their president dead and their stronghold overrun, the remaining Reapers' will broke. They surrendered, threw down their weapons, and fled. The junkyard belonged to the club. The ride back to the compound was triumphant but somber. They had won, but at a cost. There were injuries, a few serious, but they had all come home. When the bikes roared back into the courtyard, Maya didn't wait. She ran through the crowd, her eyes only on James. He was off his bike, his face smeared with grime and sweat, a cut on his forehead, but his eyes were alive and blazing with victory and relief. He caught her as she launched herself into his arms, spinning her around as he buried his face in her neck, holding her as if he would never let go. "It's over," he breathed into her hair. "It's finally over." That night, the compound celebrated a victory unlike any other. The weight of a decades-old enemy was lifted. The air was thick with the smells of grilled meat, whiskey, and cigar smoke, and the sound of raucous laughter and loud music. It was a celebration of survival, of brotherhood, of a future secured. As a bonfire blazed in the center of the courtyard, James stood before the entire club, his arm tight around Maya's waist. Jessica stood nearby, smiling tentatively, now understanding the fierce loyalty that defined these people. "Brothers!" James called out, and the crowd fell silent. "We stand here tonight stronger than ever. We've faced down our enemies and we've protected our own." He looked down at Maya, his eyes filled with a love so profound it made her heart ache. "A few months ago, a woman walked into a junkyard and saw beauty where we only saw a ghost. She saw potential in a pile of rust. She brought the heart of this club back to us. She reminded us of who we are." He turned to face her fully, taking both of her hands in his. The entire club watched, a respectful silence hanging in the air. "Maya," he said, his voice thick with emotion but loud enough for all to hear. "You are the best thing that has ever happened to this club and to me. You are our strength, our conscience, and our future." He dropped to one knee. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Maya's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. James pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside wasn't a traditional diamond, but a stunning custom piece, a band of dark, brushed tungsten inlaid with a strip of metal that had been carefully taken from the gas tank of the Genesis bike and set with a single fiery ruby. "This," he said, his voice ringing with sincerity, "is my life." He pointed to the tungsten and the piece of the Genesis. "And this," he pointed to the ruby, "is my heart. They've always belonged to you since the moment you stared me down in your garage. Marry me." The word yes was lost in her sob of joy, but her frantic nodding was answer enough. The courtyard erupted in a deafening roar of approval, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy from 80 hardened outlaws. James slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect, heavy, substantial fit, and then he stood, sweeping her into his arms and kissing her deeply as the club cheered and whistled around them. Later, as the celebration wound down, Maya stood with James by the Genesis bike, now permanently enshrined in a place of honor in the courtyard. She leaned against him, his arms wrapped around her, her back to his chest, the ruby on her finger gleaming in the firelight. "It's funny," she mused, looking at the ancient motorcycle. "I paid $600 for a pile of scrap and it gave me everything. A family, a purpose, a love I didn't know was possible." James rested his chin on her head. "No, Maya, you didn't buy a pile of scrap. You bought a key that unlocked a destiny for all of us. You didn't just find the Genesis, you became the Genesis. You are the beginning of our next chapter." He turned her in his arms, his eyes serious and full of a love that promised a lifetime of adventures. "And I can't wait to spend every single page of that chapter with you." As the embers of the bonfire danced into the starry sky, mingling with the constant, comforting rumble of the club, Maya knew her story was just beginning. A story not of a struggling artist, but of a queen, a partner, a force of nature. A story written in grease, gasoline, and the unwavering forever kind of love. Thank you for watching. Can you imagine what you would do if 80 Hells Angels showed up at your door? Subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what you would have done in her shoes.